Please take your seats. The program is about to begin.
Good morning. Welcome to day 2 of the greatest supply chain show on earth, MODEX 2014. My name is George Prest, and I am the CEO of MHI. And we're honored to have you here today, and we're proud to present this great event to you this week. After the keynote speaker, I'd like to invite you all to make sure you get down on the show floor. We have over 800 exhibitors, and as of today, over 100 educational sessions on floor. So we also want to remind you that we also have the supply transportation group with us down there as well today. And we're sure you're going to find all kinds of new innovations and opportunities to find good solutions for all of your objectives. But before I introduce today's keynote speaker, I would, 2 years ago, we started a new program called the Innovation Awards, and that was at MODEX 2012. And in that original competition, we had about 70 people in the competition, companies, I should say, in the competition. This year, we had 89 companies that put in for the competition. It was brought down to 6 finalists. And yesterday, a panel of 6 individual, non-biased people went around and went through the competition and went to the various products, and they came up with some winners, which we would like to announce today. So in the first category, the winner of the best new innovation of an existing product was Product Protector, LLC, for their product protector. And I'd like to ask you all to come up here, and we'd like to give you your award. And the best new innovation goes to Intralux for their omnidirectional sorter. Could we have that group come up, please? Let's give another round of applause to both those great innovations. Today's keynote presentation features a conversation with former Wal-Mart CEO Lee Scott. Lee is known for building what many regard as the best supply chain in retail. Today, he will provide insight on how to build a logistics and supply chain organization that is a market differentiator. Moderating today's conversation is Mitch Mac Donald, President and CEO of AGILE Business Media, the parent company of DC Velocity. Mitch has over 20 years of experience in both the newspaper and magazine business, and he has covered logistics issues for over 15 years. Please join me in welcoming Mitch Mac Donald.
Good morning, everyone. I want to thank George, and I want to thank you for joining us this morning for our conversation with Lee Scott. I truly believe we're in for a real treat. Some of the insights are quite remarkable. I've been asked to cover a few housekeeping items before we begin. As the signs at the entrances noted, no photography or audio or video recording of any type is allowed. A few things you'll find on your seat. You'll see a card referencing some information on the MHI Material Handling and Logistics Roadmap. Please take it with you, read it at your leisure. I've had a chance to read the initial drafts and the final, and there's some quite interesting stuff in there about what the future of this business will be like. Also, you'll see on your seat, and we'll come back and cover this at the end, we're using text codes as ways for you folks to offer us input on how today's session was, and we'll cover that at the end. And lastly, some blank cards. We're going to have a nice, we hope, lively and engaging Q&A as we close today. And if you have any questions come to mind as we're having our conversation with Lee, please jot them down, raise your hand. One of the runners will come by and grab them and get them up to me on the stage. And lastly, as you exit today, there'll be some tables just outside the door with the March print edition of DC Velocity, which includes our profile of Lee Scott, and was something we did in preparation for today's presentation. Housekeeping complete, we can now get to the fun stuff. As George mentioned, Lee has had a remarkable career. He's, without question, in my view, one of America's most successful businessmen of the past 30 years. He's with us today to tell us what it's like to be involved in logistics at Walmart, what it's like to ascend to the position of CEO at the largest retailer in the world, and what it's like to be the steward of a logistics operation that's largely given credit for clearing the path for much of the success Walmart has enjoyed over the past 30 years. Lee became the third CEO in Walmart's history in 2000, following Sam Walton and Dave Glass. And candidly, that, I believe, is quite an achievement for a man who entered the company in 1979 as the Assistant Director of Private Truck Fleet Operations in the Logistics Division. He's widely credited for reinvigorating Walmart's mission and transforming the retailer into a respected corporate leader. During his tenure, the company emerged as the world's largest retailer with more than 2.1 million associates and 7,400 retail operations in 16 markets around the world. He oversaw a 243% increase in Walmart's global sales from $165 billion to $401 billion. He oversaw the expansion of Walmart's operations from 10 to 16 countries, including Chile, Japan, and India. And during his tenure, Walmart's profits rose annually to over $13 billion. Obviously, the company's logistics and supply chain strategy was critical to its growth and no doubt benefited from having a man in the corner office who perhaps knew better than any other the role that logistics can play in driving a company's success. And now joining us on stage to tell us about his experiences, what he learned, how we can all learn from him, the man who took logistics literally from the boardroom, took logistics literally to the boardroom.
The bedroom's not in this, is it?
It's what it said. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Lee Scott. Good morning.
Good morning. I noticed that both of us use pictures that are at least 10 years old.
I've decided there'll be no more pictures taken of me because it's not going to get any better.
Yeah. It's nice to be here.
It's a great group. It's an exciting industry. We had a chance to truck in preparation for this, and one of the things we spoke about was, I think it was back in the mid to late 80s, there was a gentleman at A.T. Kearney in Chicago named Jim Morehouse, who's given credit for first advancing the concept of logistics as a means of gaining a competitive edge in the market. And Walmart is perhaps the most often cited company as an example of someone who's done that. When you were involved in logistics and then later as CEO, did you view logistics as a means of gaining a competitive edge in the market?
Well, I think so, but I think we want to go back to when Walmart first started, and Sam Walton started the first Walmart store. We had Ben Franklin stores, but he started the first Walmart store in Rogers, Arkansas, and then he went to places like Siloam Springs and Mountain Home and places like that. And the only trucking company in Northwest Arkansas at that time was Jones Trucking, Jones Transportation. Somebody ultimately bought them, I think Roadway. Being an old Yellow guy, I'm sorry to any Roadway people here, but it just delights me to think that it's now Yellow Roadway, and Yellow comes first. But anyway, Sam couldn't get anybody to deliver to the stores without, like 7 days. You'd go to Mountain Home, Arkansas, but it had to go from Jones's terminal in Springdale to Jones's terminal somewhere else to, in Little Rock to get on a truck to go. And that's why Walmart ended up developing its own self-distribution. Everybody else, Kmart and all the other companies, James Way, Rose's, all these other companies were serviced by distributors and by trucking companies who would deal every day.
Mm-hmm.
And so Sam would carry merchandise actually in his station wagon to deliver to the stores. And then he started his own truck fleet to deliver to the stores, and he had to have a warehouse because there was no warehouses in Bentonville. So it all started because he had no choice to do what he wanted to do. He had to have his own distribution center, his own trucks. Out of that then really came David Glass, who in the late 1970s came to Walmart and started then building the first mechanized distribution center with Rapistand equipment and all that in Searcy, Arkansas. That's probably when Walmart really started thinking that there's something about this that gives us an advantage, that it gives us a cost differential that is important. I think David is the guy who really gets the credit for seeing that and making that difference. But you know, it's dressed up a lot anymore. You guys are logisticians and all that. I mean, when I started, I was assistant director of trucking. And you know, my goal was to be the director of trucking and then eventually be the director of warehousing. Because the warehousing guys always made more money than the trucking guys. That turns out J.B. Hunt proved me totally wrong, but yeah.
In the mainstream, I think if you talk to most consumers, you say, you know, what's different, what's special about Walmart? And there are many things, but the thing that comes to mind is low pricing.
Yeah.
Low prices every day.
Yeah.
Could you draw the connection for us between the logistics operations and the ability to maintain low prices as a marketing edge?
Well, Sam believed that the supplier, and there's one great supplier sitting on the front row here, Yarn, which we actually make a good margin on, in case there's anybody from P&G here. He believed that the supplier was your partner.
Yep.
And so he believed then that if you treated them right, if you lived up to the orders you placed, if you paid them on time, if you dealt with them with respect, that they could help choose who wins by how they serve you and how you interact with them, what's new, what should we be doing. And so by having those warehouses and having that connection with those suppliers, then it allowed us to cut cost out, but more than cutting cost out, it allowed us to have what we needed to have, what we needed to have to be effective. So we would turn dolls' heads one time a year, but we had a 75 margin, so you know it makes sense.
Yep.
But you don't have to warehouse them. And so those are the kinds of things that having our own warehouse, having our own truck fleet allowed us to do. On the other hand, as we matured, Mike Duke then took over in logistics. He also then used outside carriers and some outside warehouses to help make sure that your standard and your cost basis didn't get out of hand. It's like being a private company or a public company. I had a friend that went to a private company from Wal-Mart. And I said, what's the difference? He said, oh, if you're private, you can do really stupid things. And so you have to be careful starting to think that your truck fleet's always the most efficient and effective, or that your warehouse is the most. You're better off if you have something you can compare to.
Yep. Within the logistics profession, there's been an awful lot of discussion, certainly for as long as I've been covering the market, which George actually must have had an old bio because it's been 25 years, not 15. There has always been endless discussion about, does the value of logistics and supply chain get the proper visibility at the boardroom level? Now, I know you prefer to be humble, but just as Walmart is identified as a shining example of how logistics can help you compete effectively, you're sort of, if you will, a bit of a poster child for the man who started out as an assistant fleet manager and then ascended all the way to the corner office. Yeah. How do you feel about being viewed that way?
Well, I like it.
Okay.
I do. I I like that. I like logistics. You know, when I was a salesman for Yellow, I'd never known a salesman except for the guy who sold mobile homes in Baxter Springs, Kansas. So when I became a salesman for Yellow, the first thing I did was buy a white belt and white shoes and seersucker pants. And started calling on people in Monette, Missouri and places like that. When I got into Walmart and as assistant manager of that truck fleet, there's one, you need to understand this. I was traveling with Rob Walton, and Rob said, well, how did Lee, who started out in trucking, end up the CEO of what at that time was the largest company in the world? Not just retail, the largest company in the world. And Rob looked him right in the eye and he said, everybody who was qualified quit. This is a chairman of the board. But I remember the Walmart truck drivers taught me that at all cost, you'd better be honest. You know, and I think in logistics, you don't get into logistics because you want to get your ego fed.
Yep.
You do not. It's real people doing real work. And you better have some appreciation for that person in Brookhaven, Mississippi on August the 4th in 120 degrees relative heat who's loading that trailer. And I think being in logistics, dealing with real people, doing real work, and yet it's sophisticated, so it's not like you can do it and not be reasonably intelligent.
Sure.
I think it makes you a better leader. I think it makes you a better manager. And I would tell you, I think dealing with the Walmart truck drivers and learning how to communicate and the people on the floor of the distribution center, I think it made me a better person. Mm-hmm. I think I became, you know, more of who I really was and developed an ability to be honest without always having to be hurtful.
So you would suggest that in logistics as a profession, someone's on a career track, they may be looking to grow. It's a good spot to be because of sort of the macro generalist skill set you get about all the things that are going on with the company and serving the customer?
Well, I mean, think about if you want to be involved in technology and programming and systems and integration, you can be in logistics. If what your skill set is that you like to identify with people and lead people, and you want to create a group and a morale around, accomplishments, you can do that. I think it is a great way to do it. And if you look at Walmart now, you have Mike as chairman of the executive committee of the board. You have Roland Ford, who ran Walmart's logistics, is the executive vice president in charge of administration. He's over information systems and all these other areas of the whole company.
Right.
So, what I see at Walmart, and maybe it's partly because you know these people and you promote them, but they develop people in logistics develop general skills that are needed in the world today. They did this, before they promoted me to CEO, they sent a number of us down and had us psychoanalyzed, which for Walmart was quite a step. We're not overly sophisticated. And while some of the results were frightening, the interesting thing about it is the guy who did the test told me that, they do intelligence tests, judgment tests, organizational skills tests, they did all these things. And he said, in their history, the number one predictor of success in your next job when you went through their program was how you scored on judgment. Not intelligence, not organization, not anything else. Judgment was the number one predictor of success. And I think in logistics, I think you have to make daily decisions on you have to have good judgment to make it all work and to keep it going. And I think that makes a difference. And lastly, I do give long answers, but that keeps the number of questions down. Lastly is I think the reason a lot of people in logistics aren't moving up is because I think logistics people underestimate how good they really are.
Yeah.
There's not a buyer or a merchant in the world that works for a retail chain that underestimates their skills. But would you agree with that? You've been calling on them for 40 years. But I think logistics people, for some reason, I think it plays to us this humility and all of that, which I like, but I think it plays to it, and we play to it so much that we forget the fact that the logistics people really have a lot to add.
Yeah, and they're in a role that hard-pressed to find an aspect of the company that logistics in one way or another doesn't touch all the way to the customer.
And you have to do it right.
Yeah. Yep.
I mean, it doesn't matter if Amazon has 10 million items on their website, which I haven't counted yet, but it does matter if I order that one thing and it didn't get here on the day it was supposed to, as everybody found out at Christmas.
Right.
No, it's and on the other hand, it is not like in a buyer. A buyer will buy, I don't know, some new socket set that's purple, and they'll have a 95% sell-through and we'll worship them. Yep. But really, when a distribution center, runs an entire year and never has a trailer that sits on the lot more than 24 hours without being unloaded, nobody calls them and says, great job.
Right. Well, we've said in the past, if you're in logistics, expect the best compliment you may get today is that your phone didn't ring.
Yeah.
Because everything's where it's supposed to be.
Yeah. I used to compliment myself, but
That's right.
there's a bunch of Wal-Mart people up here in the front. The problem is they know these things are true. They're not just funny.
5 years removed from retirement and even further removed from an active operational role within logistics. But thinking back to that, in terms of scale alone, what were some of the obvious or even subtle things that you look back now and say it was different because we were so big? Was it a bigger challenge because you were so big, or were there opportunities because you were so big?
Well, when you are large, every negative that you can have because of size accrues to you automatically. You don't have to work to get any of the negatives. Yeah. They just come. Everything that you do that's good, you have to work to make sure that people can see that in particular your own people can see the good that you're doing. Size is a terrible issue to deal with. At Walmart is really impacted also by the fact that you have this extremely large effort against you by the Service Employees Union and United Food and Commercial Workers. Mm-hmm. Well-funded, very sophisticated people, not the union people you think about who are, not educated and not sophisticated. These people are. And so I'll give you an example. I was sitting there in my house watching Fox News, and which I think is supposed to be kind of conservative, and across the scroll is, I think it was 11 U.S. soldiers killed in Iraq. The next, Canadian Prime Minister dissolves Parliament, calls for elections. The next, Walmart store manager offends African American. A Walmart store manager in Tampa, Florida, said something he should not have said, and he shouldn't have said it. But it is the third thing behind Canada dissolving the Parliament and soldiers killed in Iraq. And that is how effective that has been. And so that has compounded, that is compounded by the fact that you're so big, because I'm with 2.1 million people. There are people every day doing things that if you knew about would just scare you to death. You know what I mean? Do you know a city that has 2.1 million people that doesn't have a jail? I mean, people are people. And so if what you want to do is take our 2.1 million and you want to take the 50 worst, you can write the worst story in the world about Walmart. But if you'd like to take the best 2 million out of it, you can write a heck of a great story. Yeah. So that, for me, because I came in the middle, and as the campaign started, because we didn't have this problem before we went to food and started the super centers. And I came in, and what I thought was that everybody who disagreed with us hated us and wanted us out of business. I categorized everybody the same. And then when Katrina occurred, our people did the most extraordinary things. We had a woman in Pass Christian or Waverly, Mississippi, one of those two, who got on a bulldozer and bulldozed through the store into the pharmacy, broke into the pharmacy and set up and started dispensing medication to the townspeople who needed it so badly because they had lost their homes and everything. She had no authority. We had people who swam across flooded levees and ditches to get to the store, to open the store up, to get boots and socks and all that for first responders. And then there's this wonderful picture that I moved this past week that's going in my office, and it is a picture of Walmart trucks lined up on a 2-lane road outside of New Orleans, this one right after the other, and they just have water and boots and food and all this stuff before FEMA, before anybody did anything. And so I asked the question, no, thank you. But I asked the question, you know, why can't we be that Walmart all the time? Why are we spending so much of our time being defensive about who we are? And why don't we say, what can we do because we're so big that nobody else can do? And that's when we stepped up and said, you know what? We can make a difference in the environment. So I go to Washington, D.C., and one of the Republicans says, you got to quit this environmental stuff. He said, you're making these global warming people look like they're credible. And I said, oh, we're cutting out packaging, we're loading trailers fuller, we're cutting out these bad chemicals that are easily replaced. I said, you want us to spend more money just so other people look like they're not smart? I'm not sure that's going to work well.
Did he answer yes?
Well, he didn't answer, but he didn't like the answer.
Right.
And anyway, and then we also called for a reauthorization of the Voters' Rights Act. And people said, why were you getting into politics? We're the largest employer of African Americans in the United States. Our associates cared about that. It made a difference to them.
Sure.
And we called for an increase in the minimum wage. Why? Because we didn't pay the minimum wage. We were getting hammered. People said, oh, you pay the minimum wage. You pay. Well, we didn't pay the minimum wage, but our competitors were. So if you raise the minimum wage, they all got a higher cost. You know, I mean, we're in Arkansas, but it doesn't mean we're idiots.
Well, I guess that would be an example of leveraging the advantage of mass as opposed to the problems of having a large mass.
Well, that's exactly.
Yeah.
And so through that, and then one other learning, and I do these 10 things I learned at Walmart, which is really, it's fun for me to do. I really like it. And I really, because, you know, you get the sense before the day's over, if you haven't already, that I find myself really amusing. And so I said, you know, these 10 things I learned, and I was talking to a college group, and it's about 5 years ago, and this one kid said, how long are you with Walmart? And I said, 30 years, and he said, you learned 10 things? But one of them is that the most helpful voice you hear may be the voice that's the most critical. And once we decided that not everybody hated us, then we could talk to Sister Barbara at the Interfaith Council, who had an interest in what was happening with women. And we could take the sandbags down and the machine guns and talk to her about what she wanted. And what she found out is Sister Barbara, she didn't want us to go away. She wanted us to be a better company.
Yeah.
And so I think in 2005, we just matured in a number of ways. And what we found is that people were willing to embrace us if we did the right thing.
Mentioned in the opening MHI, which is spearheaded the development of the Material Handling and Logistics Roadmap, which really is, it's an intriguing document. We've talked about it a little bit, and it takes a long look. What will this world in logistics, supply chain, material handling look like in 2025? There are myriad topics that are covered, and a lot of them are fascinating, but one that seems to really keep coming up is the issue of organizational development and career development. Now, based on your background, both in logistics and at the CEO level, what do you see as the key aspects of that for our workforce, for the economy overall moving forward?
Well, no, I think that's I think it's difficult. There's an article this morning about Tennessee and someplace else talking about free community college educations for people. And what they're doing is looking, if you apply the safety net, which is so broad today, and you look at the cost of only that high school education in general, that it actually is cheaper to give that person those next 2 years of education based upon what the studies show than it is to pay the lifelong food stamps and other support that ends up being paid. And the governor of Tennessee, Bill Haslam, is saying, you know, let's invest in these people and let's give them a roadmap out of what's going to be otherwise a lifetime of living on the edge of poverty. I wouldn't say always in poverty, but living on the edge. And I think that is critical. It is, the young people in here wouldn't understand this, elder people would. I mean, when I joined Walmart, we averaged one accident every 240,000 miles. Friday night during Christmas season, when the drivers had hit the door, the dispatcher would say, throw the logbooks away, we got freight to haul. I mean, you wouldn't do that today for anything. You have automated, and it wasn't a good idea then. I think Walmart's accidents now must be one for every 4 million miles or something like that. Everything becomes more sophisticated. You can't, through sheer brute force, you can't get on top of issues and problems. You have to have integrated systems to serve customers. That's what they demand. And the velocity of what goes through distribution centers is so great that if one distribution center is down for any period of time, you can't make it up somewhere else. So everything has to work in a way that is much different than it did when I first started. Mr. Walton got so mad about Searcy, Arkansas, and how much it was costing, that before the Rapistan equipment was in, he made them go down and start shipping freight through the building. He couldn't stand the fact they had a top on it. Didn't have sides. You had a top on it, and there wasn't nothing going through there. He just thought it was ridiculous. So they ended up, the CFO and everybody ended up in Searcy unloading trailers. And, you know, we were talking last night, and George and I were, and I think if you look out 25 years, that almost everything is going to be exactly the same it is today. There'll still be trucks on the highway. They're going to have rubber tires and, you know, steel belted. I mean, it's just the way it is. You're going to have a truck driver behind the truck, you know, most of the time. So, but the changes that will have occurred will be profound. Not everything changes.
Right.
But the changes that do occur will be profound. Walmart's doing $480 billion this year. But Amazon exists and has made profound changes in retail because of what they've done. The internet has made profound changes. The money you're spending out of your pocket on Verizon and AT&T versus spending in a store is having a profound effect. So huge differences, but yet most everything else about life is pretty much the same as it was.
But while all that changes, some of the ways things happen are going to change. Doesn't that not call for a pretty significantly different skill set for the workforce we see coming online in the next 25 years?
Well, I think it's two things. One, it may be a smaller workforce as more things are automated. And secondly is then you know, if you have a machine that's loading that pallet instead of a person, the education level of making that machine work and integrating it into the order system and all the rest of that's a totally different skill. So I think that's right. And Bill Gates gave a speech just this past week where he talked about the fact that he thinks people are underestimating the number of jobs in this world that are going to be replaced with robots and systems and all the rest. And I don't think his comments are in any way self-serving. I think they are just simply the truth. Yep. And I think it'll be true in maintenance and diagnostics and the ability to not have to do just generalized maintenance with replacing every roller, but knowing which roller is likely to fail and knowing when to replace it. So you cut out that cost. But again, you're not just going to have the person who can go replace the roller. They're going to have to be the person who understands the system that reports back what needs to be done. Yep. So I think Doug McMillon is the new CEO at Walmart. I think Doug is the first CEO at Walmart, other than Sam, obviously, but the first CEO at Walmart who actually has been developed to be the CEO of Walmart. He's been a buyer. You know, he's been in other areas. He's been in international. He's been in the U.S. He was president of Walmart International. He's done everything that, you know, that there is in Walmart in a way that allows him to have been developed with a real plan that says, here's somebody who has the potential to be, and he has been developed. My view, though, is that shame on you if you sit back and wait for your company to develop you. I signed up at Columbia University to go to a finance for non-finance people class. I was the first Walmart person to ever go to a class like that. After I signed up for it, I went and told my boss I'd signed up for it. He was a little shocked, Mr. Soderquist. And, but I went. And then I signed up at Penn State and went to the 2-week logistics class. That's the first time I ever heard people talk about logistics. And I believed, and then I would just listen to Don and David, Don Soderquist and David Glass and Sam. And, you know, it was like being at an MBA class every week with Sam Walton. It's like, when you see these people like Bill Gates and Warren Buffett spent the night at the house, you know, I mean, when you're a CEO of Walmart, the things you get to do are just like extraordinary. I mean, they really are, and they're fun. But one of the things you find out is these people are richer than you because they know things you don't know. You know what I mean? It's not like an accident. Right. so you know, Sam, when he liked me, he called me Levius. And when he was mad at me, he'd call me Scott. And Friday morning, there were only 20 people in the management meeting on Friday mornings when I joined the company. And today there's 350 or something that are officers. And so I sat at this table, and I always sat at that corner, like that corner, because Sam sat here and he couldn't really see me in that corner. And so Mr. Walton would go around the room and he'd point all the time. Do you have anything, Bill? Do you have anything? Oh, I saw those dress pants you put in the stores. Man, those look great. Thanks for doing that. Who bought that TV and why do you think, you know? And of course that guy had turned pale white. But I remember one time Sam looked at me and he said, Scott, he said, what has happened to your driver uniform cost? And I said, well, it's $1,500. We're a $1 billion company. This is a monthly P&L. I said, we're $1,500. And the reason we're so high over last year is because we didn't pay a bill last month. So we were way low last month. Goes to the next guy. Think of that. This is a $1 billion company. I knew the answer because I got up at 4 o'clock that morning, went in and got my P&L and went line by line and found out everything that was going to be on that P&L. He made me a better manager because he got there at 4 o'clock in the morning and he went through those P&Ls and you know what he was doing.
Sure.
He was looking for things to make a point. Every time you were with Sam, it was like an education. And he would come, when he really liked me, he would hit me with his yellow legal pad. And, you know, I'm not like into that. And yet, when he'd walk by and hit me with that pad and say, Levius, how are you? I'd just feel like I just owned the world.
It's a good day.
Isn't that funny? You know, it was, but he had that skill and having that exposure. But I think all of you, I think where you're sitting right now, watching this, I think part of it is listening. The other part is saying, what would I say different than that? What would I do differently? If I was doing the interview, would I ask that question? Would I ask it? I think everything you're involved in, you have the opportunity to do that. When you walk that floor, you're looking at product, but you also ought to look at how people display. Who's got the best display? Which display draws you to it? Why does it draw you to it? I think every one of those things that you learn, every one of those things that you think about starts to differentiate you from the person who isn't thinking about those things. And it causes you to grow and to develop. And I don't think, I guess you could say it's the company's responsibility to develop you. Do you want to leave it up to your company to determine what your future is? I don't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I want to be in charge of my own.
Right. You mentioned Amazon.
Yes.
Another element of the roadmap looking out at the future is impacts of e-commerce moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
Walmart.com also grown nicely, very robust part of the
Yeah.
business. I know you're 4 years removed, but to what extent or how do you see e-commerce changing the very successful logistics and distribution model for Walmart?
Well, it changes it. The first thing that happened, anything that could be digitized became digitized.
Mm-hmm.
So the lucrative businesses in music and movies, movies weren't, 70% of movies are sold the first 2 weeks they come out. And they're so typically good movies are sold at a loss. So you have to make all your money on the last 30% that's sold over a period of years. So movies weren't so bad. Music is bad. Obviously it's difficult. So those things moved out of the store, and that fundamentally changes your company. And then, I just think this, for people who have money, more and more of their purchases will occur on the internet. It's too easy. Mm-hmm. What you have to remember is that in this world, if you have change in your pocket today, you have more money than 2 billion people that live on this earth.
Say that again.
If you have change in your pocket,
Yep.
not ones, change in your pocket, you have more money than 2 billion people that live on this earth. And so what happens with many of us at our income levels is that we get to thinking that everybody can shop the way we can shop, and that they can buy, a little bit of freight or a little bit higher price, doesn't matter. But if you're living paycheck to paycheck and you end up having to pay a little bit more,
Mm-hmm.
the truth is you have to give something up. So maybe you don't go to the movie, maybe you don't go to McDonald's,
Yeah.
but you have to give something up.
Yeah.
And there's a sophistication level also that's required to order online that not everybody can embrace. So there's going to be the move to online is just going to continue, but it is not going to erase the fact that who are the fastest growing retail companies in America besides Amazon? Aldi's,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, Dollar General, Family Dollar, Dollar Tree. So you've got this side here that the poor just continue to get poorer. And then you've got this other side where the incomes are so high.
Yep.
And that's really that's what's happening. So, but it's going to change. It puts a lot of pressure on Walmart. Walmart now finally under Mike Duke has a really talented person running the e-commerce. But if you look at the history, it's really difficult for the incumbent to change enough to be a leader in whatever's new. I mean, the business books are littered with stories where that did not happen. I think Walmart is going to be relevant for decades and decades, and is going to have a really good online presence tied into the stores and doing things that some other people can't do.
Mm-hmm.
But Amazon will be a handful. And the worst thing about Amazon is that guy that runs it is the nicest guy. I mean, he is. Jeff is just the nicest guy, and his wife, Mackenzie, is just the sweetest gal. And, it's just hard to like your competitor.
Yes, right. It's some of the realities. You referenced earlier sustainable business practices, green logistics, all those sorts of things, and that's gaining a lot of momentum. It may have ebbed a little bit now, but it's still out there, and I think you're hearing more and more people talk about that. The world has gotten to a point where it's not just a touchy-feely Ben & Jerry's ice cream, tie-dye t-shirt, we're nice people because we're convenient.
Yeah.
It's actually, companies have learned sustainable business practices can have bottom line benefits. You were a little bit, with Walmart, of a pioneer in terms of when it started in that regard. When you became CEO in 2000, I'm looking at some notes here, you set some long-term goals to make it a company that was supplied almost entirely by renewable energy, trying to bring waste levels down to actually zero, offering more products to consumers on the shelves that were themselves environmentally friendly. What was the genesis of that at the time in 2000, and what brought you to the conclusion that would be good for Walmart?
Well, that was 2005, and that goes
Okay.
back to that Katrina. And you cannot imagine how controversial that whole thing was. So and I have my management style is management by erosion. I almost never told people what to do. I didn't typically know. So but I'd think about things, and so you'd think, and I'd ask somebody to come in and say, have you ever thought about doing this? And they could say, well, I thought about it, but I didn't think it was a good idea, and that was fine with me. But they couldn't ignore me. And so we got everybody together, and I said, I'm going to do this environmental thing. And then we got these environmental people to come in and see us. This is not the highlight of my career, is that because of Walmart and because of the campaign against us, many people could not be seen with us. So we got some environmentalists to come and see us, but they would only come if we agreed that we would never release their names that they came to Bentonville. And we met in a basement of a restaurant, not at the home office, because they would not be seen with us. And then a guy named Paul Hawkins came to see us, and he's a great environmentalist. But Paul, and he helped me write that speech.
Yep.
But Paul, I had to tell at that time, it's since, because it's actually worked, he's okay with it now, but he would only come if nobody knew that he had come to Walmart. And, but we got everybody together, and they said, well, I think we should cut our emissions by 18% by 2020, and that's this many million tons of this, and this is, and the next guy would say, I just disagree with that totally. I don't think we can do over 17. These people, they don't know crap from Shinola. And they're in there arguing about 1% waste differential in 20 years or something. And so I finally said, what? We can't do that. This went on for months. I said, why don't we just say you're going to be all supplied by natural solar and wind and others, and that we're not going to have any waste, period, and set those as our goals, and then let's just be focused on getting better. Walmart's based on three things: customers the boss, treat people with respect and dignity, and improve every day. Sam didn't actually believe that you ought to optimize anything. He believed the cost of optimization was too great. He just believed you should improve every day. And so that's what we finally did. We just set these big goals that you could hardly ever reach. But it allowed us to get off our duff and get started and then make a difference. So, but it was very, very controversial.
Technology.
Yeah.
It seems, I'm sure it's not every day, but it almost seems every day there's some sort of new breakthrough, extraordinary, sometimes disruptive technology that boosts logistics efficiencies, create new opportunities, so on and so forth. How important have technology gains in the past couple of decades been to where logistics and supply chain now is? And what do you see as some technologies out there that might be coming online that could fuel even further dramatic change?
Well, of course, it's changed everything. You go back several decades, the group that's here mostly wouldn't even think that you actually, at one point, had to remove cases from pallets and put and put labels on them for a store and actually roll them on a trailer. You didn't have tilt tray sorters and all the rest of it. But so it's changed. That's changed dramatically. I think the safety record with the quality of what's happening in trucking has changed the cost structure dramatically. What's happened with the size of trailers changed things. We don't think about that.
Yep.
But it has changed things dramatically. So, and then you get into the systems at Walmart. When I joined Walmart, we averaged, the goal was a trailer never sat on the lot over 5 days. And now, I think the goal, the standard is 1 day, if I'm not mistaken. And it's because of what they know is coming in, how they can do their manpower planning, how they can handle all of that, so that it just goes through. You then, with the integration of what's going on at the store, and the store is sending the information not just to Walmart, but Walmart's sending the information to the supplier. So our suppliers know today what was sold yesterday by individual store, by district, by region. They can do their planning. All of that then allows you to get your inventory down to a smaller level, allows you to have distribution centers that have to have less holding power.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, everything about it is a positive. All of those systems. I think in food there's a real need for affordable temperature control that helps me as a consumer. I'm a big advocate for the consumer. So I think when I go into a Walmart or a Publix or wherever, and you know how they have that deli meat?
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to know, when did they open that one they're cutting for me? And how could they have had it open 7 days and it not change the shelf life when I take it home? I think the date shouldn't be back there for them. I think the date ought to be there for me. But even as CEO, I never got that done. But and I was a little afraid to do it. But so the technology of I think there's a role there. But you also, I think technology will change. Right now, Fred Smith says that you can run trucks on the interstate without a driver safer than you can run trucks with a driver. He says the airplane of the future will have one single pilot and a dog, and the dog will be there to bite the pilot if he touches anything. But politically you just can't have a plane without a pilot.
Right.
But so I think those things are going to change. I'm on the pilot truck stop board, and they actually in a meeting the other day, a board meeting, were talking about the fact that right now you could run from pilot truck stop to pilot truck stop basically without a driver. The technology is that good. So I think that changes it. Packaging has changed. I think everything gets smaller. So you see logistics in that way changing. The compacting of detergent,
Mm-hmm.
You don't think about how much that saved. Compacting of toilet paper, the different things that have happened that have taken, tens of thousands of trucks off the road. There will be an ongoing increase in trailers, intermodal, but it won't get, it's what is it, 8% or 10% now? It's not going to get 50, but it will continue to increase. And I think all of that occurs. And what I'd like to see most, Walmart loses about $2 billion a year to shrink. And I just wish I could have done something to get RFID to a level that you could really have that store and know exactly what is in there, exactly what is leaving that store and where the issues are. I think RFID, has such promise for retail, and I think then for the consumer, because it's going to increase the in-stock at the store. And I think it'd be better for everybody.
I've gotten the sign. We've got just about 5 minutes left, but there's 2 quick questions.
Yes, sir.
I'd like to get out. Speaking to young people, and there are some here. The group actually, I don't know if any of them with us. The group actually runs a program called Classroom Day each year, and I understand this year there are over 200 young folks considering a career coming in. If they were to come to you, they're either just out of college or in college and looking forward to a career in logistics, you could give them one piece of advice, what would it be?
Oh, I don't know. You know, everybody is so different, and I think when I think about building a career and what I've learned, I think the first thing I'd want to start with is integrity. And integrity doesn't mean that you always have to say exactly what's on your mind, you know, because the truth is most of the time what's on our minds isn't that valuable to share. But I think you just start with integrity, and then it just goes from there. You know, in those 10 things that I learned, the thing that in some ways, all of the people who should have run Walmart actually did quit.
Did quit?
They did quit. They were the guys who came out of merchandising, that came out of store operations. They quit. And, you know, when you think about it, and you think about what I was able to do and being able to keep that job for 9 years and have, you know, success in that job and do some things that I'm proud of, I think it is about people. So let me tell you, if I know you're running out of time on this, so I want to tell you about Joe Bob Wilson. So when I moved to Arkansas, I'd never met a person that had 2 names like that. I used H. Lee Scott when I was young because I read something that says you can't have a one-syllable name, first name and second name. And so, and you know, probably written by somebody from Harvard or something. And so I used H. Lee Scott, so I'd sound a little fancier than I really was. And, but anyway, so I'd never met anybody. I couldn't call this guy Joe Bob. It just killed me. I'd never met anybody like that. So anyway, so I was assistant manager of the truck fleet. Eventually I got promoted to manager of the truck fleet, and Joe Bob was the operations manager. And he was just this great big guy with this huge stomach and the big belt buckle because he was a former truck driver. And I'd come in the morning, I'd be all fired up, and I'd tell Joe Bob, I'd say, Joe Bob, I got this great idea. Why don't we do this, this, and this? He'd say, oh, he said, that's a great idea. And then we could all get fired and everything will be good, you know? And anyway, so a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, no, gosh, I'm sorry, it's 5 years, I was in Phoenix, and I got a call, and it was from Joe Bob's daughter. And Joe Bob was in hospice. And it was a Thursday. It was Friday. And Joe Bob had told her that he wanted to stay alive long enough for me to get home to see him. I flew home. And I held his hand, and I told he couldn't talk, but I told stories about some of the things we did that you don't want to hear about, and that made things work. And Joe Bob would just go, he could kind of laugh, and then he died that night. I guess when I look at my career and I think about young people, it's not the fact that we increased our profits or that we increase sales. It is about the fact that I walked in here in this room today and I saw people that I was glad to see, and I think were glad to see me.
We're going to transition now to our Q&A. We have about 15 minutes. I'm hoping we have some folks with some answers. Again, use the cards. One that I've found on the podium here that we can use to start if some others come up. Seems like we've been talking about in this business collaboration forever. Mm-hmm. And got to collaborate. And people have the best intentions, but then they're competitive.
Yeah.
there's a track record that sort of proves if you collaborate on things like distribution facilities, transportation costs, so on and so forth, you can have better service, lower costs, or whatever. Will folks ever see the light, or have they seen the light? Is collaboration moving in a positive direction, or is it a quest we'll never succeed at?
Well, I think it's one of those things you always have to try to do, but you always know that it's never going to be quite what you'd like for it.
Yep.
It's like having a category captain in merchandising and you put them over laundry, and Unilever's supposed to treat P&G fairly. You know, there are some things that even God wouldn't ask people to do. So I think you have to be a little careful. But collaboration is critical, and I think if you're the big dog and you're the one building the distribution center, I think you have the right to insist that the people collaborate and that they integrate. You cannot have, you really can't have people doing what they need to do if there isn't accountability. So I just think with suppliers or with yourself or with your people, you have to hold people accountable. And, you know, I think we don't do enough reference checking. I think sales, sometimes it's done still today on personalities versus what really is.
Sure.
What is the track record? We don't make the calls because we don't really want to know the answer. And, you know, I did like Walmart's policy, and this still is a policy. Walmart takes no gratuities from anybody. And I think that really helps the decision-making process be really based on what's best for the customer.
Well, folks, thank you. You satisfied our quest for a robust, we're going to take a 10-minute break now and come back for an hour and do the Q&A.
No. Would you try to get the easiest ones?
You know what? I'm going to start with the first one I saw because I thought it was kind of fun. And this says for Lee. I'm not sure if they thought I was going to be answering questions. Do you still have your CDL?
My what?
Commercial driver's license.
No, I don't have a commercial driver's license. No.
The second question from the same individual. Briefly, your perspective on the pace of change.
It is interesting, isn't it, how quickly it is changing and how the momentum, like on the internet, I mean, just think of the iPad and tablets and what people are doing. I don't even buy books anymore. Everything is on the tablet. My USA Today is on the tablet. You know, I am in very close contact with my wife now, even when I travel. And so, I mean, I think it is changing. I think the hard part for logistics, I don't think the people in here are any more like they used to be, where logistics people were seen as kind of stuck and they weren't going to be very aggressive. The hard part now is how can you be appropriately aggressive and not just always chasing the newest, but chasing really what is a differentiator, what is going to be meaningful to you. There's so much out there, out on this floor and out there. That is really in this kind of time of change. And I think from a technology standpoint, I mean, it's pretty amazing what is going to change over this next 20 years that you're talking about.
Sure.
Yeah.
Next up, in retrospect, why, underlined, was RFID limited necessarily in success and not as successful as hoped or planned?
Well, I think it always, when I was there talking about it 5 years ago, it always came down to the cost per tag and what it was going to do. And they didn't want to put that cost per tag on the things like the Maybelline eyebrow pencil, which seemed to disappear out of a store about, you know, you sell one and you lose one.
Yep.
And same way with most cosmetics. But I don't know. I don't know why it hasn't been embraced to a greater extent than it has, and I think it should. I think it would help. I think it would help customers and help retailers. And with the technology today, you know, the costs have come down.
I think someone's just given me a follow-up question that I probably should have asked earlier. We don't have time for all 10, but maybe one or two of the best. What are the 10 things you learned at Walmart?
So if you want a great career, hire people better than yourself and give them the credit. So 1995, I was in Paris. I gave a speech. I like to say that because it really sounds good. And I gave a speech. I came back to my hotel room, and under the door was a note that says, call Bentonville at 7 o'clock in the morning, Friday morning, Central Time, which was about 1 o'clock or so Paris time. So I did. Mr. Walton, David Glass, Don Soderquist, and a guy named Bill Fields were on the phone. They said, Dean Sanders, who runs Sam's, has walked out. We don't know what we're going to do for sure, but we're thinking we're going to move this person into Sam's, we're going to move this person into specialty pharmacy and all that, and this other person into operations, and we have this one job running merchandising at Walmart that we don't have anybody to take that position. And we want you to come back on Monday and be the executive vice president of merchandising. I said, I've never worked in a store. I've never been a buyer. I don't know anything about merchandising. They said, yes, but you hired Mike Duke. And Mike, we know, can take your place. And so even if you fail, it only creates one hole. This is my career. You know what I mean? And so at the end of the year, you know, Walmart's real big on the evaluations and all that. At the end of the year, I sat down with David Glass for my evaluation. Soderquist was in there. David looks me right in the eye and said, man, you did better than we thought you'd do. That was my evaluation. And I would never have been in charge of merchandising if I had not hired Mike Duke and given Mike the credit for what he was doing at Walmart. If I'd have tried to steal the credit, they wouldn't have had the faith in Mike. And if I hadn't run merchandising, where we ended up just having a spectacular time, if I hadn't run merchandising, I could have never then taken the next step to be the CEO. So that is, to me, is the first one. And then real quickly is, don't think that what you have to say is the most important thing, or what you've said is the most important thing. The most important thing is what is heard. Have you ever had a conversation where somebody said, I told her everything she needed to hear. I told her everything she needed to hear. Well, did she hear everything she needed to hear? You know, and so the CFO at Walmart, when I was there, Tom Shoei, when he gave an evaluation, at the end of the evaluation, he would say, what are the 3 most important things that I just covered? And because you always have 2 levels of management in every evaluation, I would sit in. You cannot believe how many times the person, senior people, were being evaluated, would miss entirely the 3 things that he most wanted to impress that they should work on. And so who cares that you said what needed to be said? Did the person hear what needed to be heard? And that's, I think, critical. And the last thing, you can't talk people into good performance. I used to take, like Buckley over here, I just think that it was my responsibility to make him successful because he worked for me. Well, you know, that isn't true. It's his responsibility. I can provide him the opportunity, but I'd lay awake at night thinking about, why is so-and-so not doing this? How do I talk to him? How do I get him to think differently? They're home sleeping like a baby. You know what I mean? They have delegated to me all of the concern about their career. They're doing nothing to make their career better. So, you know, I think for all of us, you know, how do you do that? How do you make sure that in your communication that it's what's heard that's important?
I'm being told we have only time for one question,
Okay.
but I've got 2. They're interesting and they align, so
All
we're
right,
going to
I'll try to be faster.
We're going to cheat. We're going to
Okay.
cheat. We have 2
Okay.
questions. We're going to make them 1. If there's one thing you could change about your career, what would it be? And if you could point to one thing that was most rewarding or satisfying to you in your career, what would that be?
Well, I think I'll start at the last one. Is just what I told you. This past week we moved into this new house in Disney World, and the first guest we had were Mike Duke and Doug McMillan happened to be in Orlando, and they wanted to come over and see us. Then the next day, we had Giselle Reese, who runs all the Walmart stores in the U.S., came by. I love the fact that I left there in a way that I think people like me. Mm-hmm. It's shocking, but I think they do, and I like them, and I like seeing them. And I like that about my career. You know what I mean? I like that part of it. The first one was
One thing you would change if you could?
The same thing I think most people say is that you have to hold people accountable, and you just can't go on forever. It's not fair for the people who work for them. It's not fair to the organization. You don't have to be mean when you let people go, but you know, if you want to have a company that plays at the A level, I'm sorry, the people have to perform at that level, and you've got to be willing to look them in the eye and talk about how do they leave in a very respectful manner, and go do something for a company where they can be more successful. But this idea that you just simply tolerate people who are okay, you know, maybe my standard was low, but I tried to hire people who are better than me. And I just, you know, the lawyer that we had, the CFO we had, you know, you wanted people better than you, and then give them that credit and give them the authority. So I think I went too long with too many people. And then, of course, you know, I ended up with some problems.
Sure. Thank you.
No, thank you. Thanks to all of you for coming.
See you in just a minute. Wasn't that wonderful? We are now, MHI has tried something a little interesting, maybe a page from the Survivor Series. This is your chance to vote Lee and I off the island. We have some text codes, which, Gary, are they going to be displayed? They're on their sheet. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, yeah, there are sheets on your chair. If you would look, there is a text code where it says text code. That's the 5-digit phone number. And then for each of them, for each question, rate the quality of the presentation, how useful was it the right length, and when did you decide you would attend? Did you decide once you got here, or did you decide in advance of coming to Atlanta? And with that, I believe we're complete. Please remember, if you'd like a complimentary copy of the March edition of DC Velocity, which includes the profile we did with Lee prior today, they're available as you exit. Thank you very much. Have an enjoyable and a safe day.